I watched Andor, the first three episodes, and I think it's true. We do get that final, or we finally get that look into the everyday lives of just people in the Star Wars universe, which is refreshing and different. Um, Except for the fact that yes, there's still an adventure, there's still good guys and bad guys, and we are still on an adventure. It's not the working class bar comedy that I would have imagined for this, which I
Really?
still think would be
That's
fun.
what you were
No,
thinking about?
we talked about this a while back, and it's like I would love to see, like as long as Disney's doing 30-minute sitcom style stuff in otherwise serious universes, I would love to see just a bunch of like an alien or like three different species of aliens who just meet up at the cantina every night and like just sort of shoot the shit. I'd be into that. They could talk about current events and be like, "Yeah, you hear what Vader's doing?" Like it would be. I would watch that show because it wouldn't be quite so self serious. But uh, I'm not a huge Star Wars fan to begin with, and this was watchable. This, there's a compelling story to it, and we're sort of in this gray zone of morality, who's good, who's bad, and we sort of take on the side of this character who's kind of he's a stowaway, kind of an undocumented immigrant is the story, and he's living in secret on this planet as a worker, trying to find his sister who he was separated from uh, for about he's been separated for years. So he goes out at night and sneaks out and tries to find ways off the planet to go see where she is. That causes other problems in his life, but it's a story about a brother trying to find his sister. Okay, that's new. That's different. He's outrunning the law, which is looking for him. And yeah, we have some interesting and different relationships than Star Wars has normally given us. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I do not like B, the robot. I think that it was a big mistake to give him an actual voice, and I don't enjoy the stammer. It sounds fake. It sounds honestly, it doesn't even sound like a real stammer or a real stutter or even like a robotic stutter. It's annoying. I don't like how he talks. And I also think they could do a better job with, you know, R2D2 is charming because you can read into the sounds that he makes and sort of it fits in the story. Here, I don't know, the voice doesn't add anything. It really just, it's another thing that pulls me out of it. Um,
Okay.
yeah. What are you planning on watching this?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm definitely planning on watching it. I had a limited amount of time, and I chose to do like my rewatch of She-Hulk episodes. Instead of watching just one, I went like watched three or four of them all together because you
This
talked
is
about this
better than
earlier.
that for sure.
Oh, I fully expected to be. I've only heard good things about it, but from everything I've seen from the trailers, from everything I've seen from like the marketing materials, the posters, and like the behind the scenes looks, it looks like this is the evolution of Star Wars and television that a lot of people have been waiting for because
Hmm.
the comparisons I've been getting is this is the first prestige Star Wars show. This is not your run of the mill like Obi-Wan Kenobi was or like the Book of Boba Fett were. This show is basically a step up. This is like it feels like an HBO show. It feels like a like something on Amazon Prime or an Apple TV Plus. It's a much more mature like in terms of themes and like it goes into the darker corners of the galaxy that we always seem to hear about in other Star Wars media, but we
Mm-hmm.
never truly have had the chance to feel like what living under the oppressive rule of the empire feels like. And this
Yeah.
show, I think, finally is venturing to give you that experience. Like, what does it feel like for the average Joe in this galaxy to live under the oppressive rule of the Empire? And to me,
Yeah.
that is fascinating.
That, and you know what? That in and of itself is super refreshing. It's really nice to see, really, because that's what Star Wars is. It's world building. That's what has always made it as popular and as compelling as it is. That there's all this detail and all of this narrative that you can get from the way they do certain things. I will say that some of that technique gets really annoying, and it's like there's a guy in a bell tower, but the bell doesn't look like a bell on this planet. And it's like, if I were watching any other show that took place in this universe, and there's like, we're going to show the bell tower guy at the beginning of this, I'd just be like, I don't care. Don't show me these details. Some of these details are just overkill, and they actually don't add to the story. It's just, this is different. And I go, great, great. However, now the actual premise of the show is to build on the world that people have fallen in love with for the last 50 years. And it's actually adding to the reality because we're fleshing out the world. We're looking at characters and people who plausibly could exist in this world. And it's not just the chosen one and the princess and the rogue pilot. It's like, this is a day in the life on a planet in a galaxy far, far away. That's what we wanted. And it seems like that's kind of what we want, is the closer we can start to identify ourselves in Star Wars, I think the more compelling it becomes. And without getting into the political implications of like how relatable it is to live in a, under the regime, as it were, like, it's a fairly grounded show. And with the technology available in that universe, it feels like, yeah, I could take a trip to a club on a different planet if I had, 900 credits to spend on this for the night. Okay? It's not so out of reach, and it's a much more personable story than I think any other, hero's journey stuff is. So it's refreshing, it's different. And if you love Star Wars and you love the universe and just being visually taken in, this does that.
Okay, so the question that I would follow up with is, do you think this show is an outlier, or is this an indicator of this is where the Star Wars franchise is headed now? Because I mean, the premise of what we're really trying to discuss here, beyond just Andor, is the state of the Star Wars franchise as a whole. Because we have recently had things like, I think a great example of the kind of Star Wars that maybe people don't want to see anymore is Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
It's a show that on the surface, like, it had this veneer of basically a lot of what Andor seems to be delivering on. But then
Mm.
ultimately, when you got into watching the show, you quickly realized that the show was it was that they promised a lot, but they didn't deliver on like that grounded, character-based struggles. I mean, you know,
Well,
how am I blanking on his name? Ewan McGregor did a great job, but like whatever character moments he was given, but it seemed like the story by and large was limited to being that surface level, superficial Star Wars that people want to get away from, whereas
here's
Andor is
yeah.
diving like a few levels deeper than that. I mean, and do you think this is an outlier in doing so, or are we going to get more Star Wars shows moving forward that go a level
I
further?
think it's an outlier, but not necessarily for those reasons. One of the first things that you notice watching this show is there's not one Jedi, there's not one lightsaber. There aren't really even ray guns for a
I've
while.
kind of
It's just,
that's kind of nice. I like that.
well, yeah. There's no Sith Lord. There's nothing like that in this, and I think this will be successful because it will show that Star Wars can deliver this kind of thing. But what people want, what they have wanted, what they've paid for time and time again, is the big bad, the lightsabers, and the mysticism of what it means to be a Jedi. So maybe if we continue down this path, it means showing Jedi in training and what that looks like when they're in a time of peace and like understanding the Jedi way of life. I'd watch that show, and if it were about like the building the moral character of somebody like Obi-Wan, to say like, this is the training I go through, this is the discipline, these are my values, and this is my community. Like, I would actually watch that. I'd be like, what's it like to be a Jedi Knight in the time where they're training to be Jedi Knights? And it wouldn't have to be we're going up against. It would be a lot like Top Gun, because it would be these guys in training, where they're getting over their own egos in pursuit of a greater good. I think it worked for Top Gun. It would probably work for Star Wars too. So yeah, I think, to answer your question, it's an outlier because this is showing us the common man in the Star Wars universe. It's important that we do that, to say, we did that. But I think we're going to return to lightsabers, Sith Lords, and all that kind of stuff. And maybe even showing that contrast of like, I grew up thinking I was going to be, we could show two brothers, one who joins the Empire and one who becomes a Jedi. Like, it would be cool to see that kind of thing. This is sort of a trap we're in, though, because we like the big blockbuster stuff.
Yeah, and to that end, like, I think the good thing about this show is not only are we getting a show that's not got like 6 episodes or 9, this has got 12 episodes. Granted, most episodes are still like 35 to 40 minutes in runtime, and then whatever else you get for credits. It's got 12 episodes in season 1, and then it's got 12 episodes in season 2. Now the thing is, season 2, they're only just about to start filming it. So given that they're shooting a lot of this in big stages that they've set up in London and stuff, and then they're going on location like Star Wars movies always have done, and they're using the volume and that new tech that Mandalorian basically pioneered, they're using it in limited fashion. Whereas I think Obi-Wan Kenobi leaned heavily into it, and it suffered for it. And I think here they're doing, I think, Star Wars the right way from a production standpoint, something that George Lucas would have been proud of, because like going on location, filming, it makes it tangible, real. But that also means season 2 is likely not going to be here until at least until 2024. So that's my roundabout way of saying I'm glad that even though this is maybe the exception to the rule, this one season is not all we're going to get from this show. We're going to get a season 2, after which we'll be done with this show. But 2 seasons is still better than like one 6-season episode. And when you're getting 24 episodes, that to me is, I'm looking forward to that.
Well,
and
correct
like
me
you
if I'm
mentioned,
wrong.
Ahsoka and The Mandalorian season
Yeah.
3, like those shows are probably going to go back to the whole Jedi, the mysticism. But then they have the Acolyte, which is like, I think that's the one that the director of the recent the recent Spider-Man trilogy is going to be directing. He left that new Fantastic Four movie to go work on it. I forgot his name. John Watts. So, and that's got a terrific cast too. I mean, A-list people all over. But
Well, so
yeah.
the other shows like The Mandalorian, and even Obi-Wan, those were supposed to be movies originally, weren't they?
So The Mandalorian, I think, was always conceived as a TV show. Obi-Wan
Okay.
Kenobi was supposed to be a movie. Then it got shelved because, once Solo flopped, they were like, should we even be doing this? And obviously, we haven't really seen a new Star Wars movie. Not really. We haven't seen a new Star Wars movie since the Rise of Skywalker.
Hmm.
So I think there was always meant to be a movie, and then they basically took the script and sort of cannibalized it for
Hmm.
parts, and then put together a 6-episode run that I quite frankly was very underwhelmed by. But then there was that fan cut going around where somebody went in and took everything from Obi-Wan Kenobi the series and turned it into like a concise 2 hour long movie, and I was like night and day as to how much better it was, and you could tell maybe they should have just made it as a movie anyway, because
Yeah.
maybe they took the wrong lessons away from Solo. I'm pretty sure if they made an Obi-Wan Kenobi movie with Ewan McGregor, it doesn't matter if Solo flopped or if The Rise of Skywalker generated a lot of negative buzz, but I mean, deservingly so in my opinion of that movie at least. I think the Obi-Wan Kenobi movie would have been a great success, but it looks like their focus is on television right now. Speaking of which, let me
Yeah.
ask you, Star Wars has always been, it started out as a movie franchise.
Yeah.
Today, it exists as a TV franchise as of right now because they simply don't have, it seems like, at least any movie in active development, and whatever they do have, we have no idea when anything's coming out. Taika Waititi has committed to doing a movie. Recently, Ryan Johnson said that he's still probably going to do the trilogy that he promised us a long time ago when he did The Last Jedi, but who knows when that's going to happen. They just recently took the Rogue Squadron off next December release date that it was on, so it's off the release calendar entirely, and Disney has it nowhere else slotted. They didn't move it; they just took the data, they just took it off the calendar. So that was a Patty Jenkins movie that they had promoted like a few years ago at D23, and Kevin Feige has also been developing a Star Wars movie apparently, which we haven't really heard any meaningful updates on in a long time.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, all of these TV shows are going on, and they did that big Empire. I think it was Empire Magazine did a piece on like this is the universe we're building of Star Wars and on TV or Disney Plus. Where do you think Star Wars belongs? Do you think this is the way to go? Should they stick to doing TV because it's working, or do you think because if they can do Andor and it can work as well as it's done so far, then should it just stick to TV like Star Trek has largely done throughout its history, or
Well,
should they then venture back to the where they started and that's in the theaters? Like,
let's take a look back at what we said about Avatar, because I think that really is where we get the 10,000 foot view of Disney's strategy going forward. If the question is, the future of Disney, is it in the metaverse, and is this is all of the is the surplus of content, because we're getting more and more from all different directions, and the characters and the world is becoming more and more accessible, and it's easier for us to see ourselves in it. I think really what it turns into is, how do we bridge the gap between all of the details being told to us versus you get to experience this? And it'll be a tough jump because some people still just want to be told stories. And the story of Luke Skywalker and the Death Star is a good story. People like that story. And not everybody wants to experience, and participate in the story that is being told to them. I mean, you look at anybody just sitting back and binging Netflix, it's you're pretty much just leaning back or lying down and, falling asleep with Cheetos on your face. You don't necessarily want to walk around in all of this. But I do think that, the alternative to an expensive ticket to Disneyland is put on your goggles, hang out in Star Wars world for a little bit.
but don't you think like the majesty of like these worlds, like what Star Wars created a long time ago and has since propagated, you just can't do. I mean, my opinion on that is you can't do it justice the way it was originally intended, like George Lucas pioneering theatrical sound technology and like digital video editing and then just visual effects with ILM. All of that was done for a theatrical experience on as big a screen with as good of a sound system as you can possibly get, best picture quality. Like they're re-releasing right now. I mean, ILM has been involved with Avatar, and they're re-releasing the original Avatar in 4K HDR and IMAX 3D, and the new Avatar is coming out soon, and it's basically a theatrical experience. They're like, you got to go see this in the theaters. Top Gun Maverick was one of those movies that you had to go see it in theaters simply because it's meant to be seen on that kind of a scale. Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan's known for doing the exact same thing with all of his movies. So I mean, my argument would be I think Star Wars belongs in the theater. I mean, look, you can have a metaverse experience with it, where you put on the goggles and you have this immersive environment. But do you really think that's gonna make up for like the collective experience you have
No.
watching a movie in theaters?
No, and I think, honestly, like, just I'll come out and say it. I don't think it's the right move to try and put people into the metaverse. I think better storytelling is what people want. They want good stories, and I think it would be nice to have a reason to go back to the theaters. And the thing is, because there's such a heavy reliance on technology, and honestly, just writing has gotten really, really bad in the last 10 years. Um, I just think that people don't have a reason to spend the money. And, the tickets have gotten expensive too. Like, give me a reason to go to the theater and experience what's so great about going to the theaters, and I'll go. But for right now, it's just, the stories aren't compelling enough. The experience isn't compelling enough. And so maybe with Top Gun, hopefully with Avatar, and hopefully with Star Wars going forward, we get a reason to return to the theater.
And to follow up on that, I did want to last question on this subject. Star Wars as a franchise has always had this thrust and this narrative thrust and this forward momentum. Narrative thrust seems to be the phrase of the day that I'm going to stick with here. But um, Star Wars is always like under George Lucas leadership. Like, I mean, Grant, he did the original trilogy. I'm granted he went and did the prequel trilogy, which you can say was like not exactly moving forward, but it was giving us a look at an entirely different kind of Star Wars than what the original trilogy was.
Mm-hmm.
And throughout his time with the franchise, and then even like what he did behind the scenes, like with the creation of Pixar, like that came out of Lucasfilm and ILM. ILM obviously in and of itself, and all the people that came out of there. All THX technology, all of that stuff. George Lucas has always like wanted to be like at the forefront of technological innovation, and then Star Wars has been the embodiment of that forward thinking. But under like the current Disney leadership with Kathleen Kennedy leading Lucasfilm, I mean, who was chosen by George Lucas, mind you, but with now Lucas no longer in charge of the franchise, he has said himself that he's not a big fan of what they're doing these days, where they're just kind of rehashing old stories that Star Wars has already told or filling in
Yeah.
the gaps rather than moving in a new direction and doing something bold. So do you think that's a result and a byproduct of corporate synergy and corporate thinking where they want to play it safe and it's safer to go back and revisit stories that you already know worked in the past rather than take risks like what George Lucas did with the prequel trilogy? And yes, not all of those risks paid off, but people still look back at that, and it may not have been as revolutionary as the original trilogy was, but the prequel trilogy set the benchmark for what digital visual effects were and what
Yeah.
today power movies like Avatar. So from Lucas's perspective and the philosophy he brought to the franchise versus what we have now, where do you land on that? Like, do you think we're going in the right direction under Disney's ownership, especially in recent years,
I
or
mean,
should we be changing tact? Or is it even possible? Does Disney have the balls, let's be honest, to take the kind of risks that George Lucas always did with the franchise?
well, I can answer that one real fast. No, um, because it's Star Wars just as an IP. Like, it's really profitable. It has a fan base that is rabid for more, and they will buy anything you send them 50 times. And that's why we've gotten the uh, the prequels and filling in the gaps of characters that we already know. Really easy to market that. Um, Even the concept of a baby Yoda is such a Disney cheap trick. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
is it corporate? Yes. But I've always been of the opinion that Star Wars has overstayed its welcome. And I actually think that, Lucasfilm, George Lucas even said, like, he'd like to move on to more adult, interesting, compelling stories. That Star Wars is kind of for kids. I happen to agree. Star Wars is very childish. Um, and yet, you know, it inspires people. And I think if Disney were true to Disney, if it were true to Lucasfilm and the mission of Star Wars, which was to wow people with something innovative and something that inspired their imaginations, like, you would take bigger risks. You would show us something different. Um, So maybe that means starting another universe, telling another story. But I think it's so, it's just been so overdone. And
Yeah.
they're gonna squeeze as much as they can until there's nothing left, and then they're gonna start it over.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, everything gets rebooted, and I almost shudder to think about the day that maybe something like a Star Wars gets rebooted. Maybe it won't happen in our lifetimes. Who knows? Um, like I, for one, I've been watching that Light and Magic documentary on Disney Plus, which kind of chronicles the early days of the ILM and how much of an influence Star Wars had on even like all the big like Steve Spielberg, Ron Howard, James Cameron, like these guys who were the titans of the industry, and the influence that it had beyond just the people like that you see walking the red carpet, and the people who are doing a lot of the hard work behind the scenes, and how movie technology, like we talked about before the show, Photoshop, Avid, Pixar, all of these things came out of those. I think to me that is more important than even like you said, like the franchise at the end of itself. I think that philosophy, that mentality of that forward thinking mindset, that they were always looking to push the envelope and they were never happy to just keep going through the motions to do the same thing over and over again. Each new movie under George Lucas's ownership of Lucasfilm was like, we want to do something different, something new. It may or may not work, but we're going to take risks. And
Yeah,
I really personally hope eventually, somehow, some way, Star Wars or even other Disney properties kind of return to doing that, because
yeah,
that's what even Marvel in its first few phases of movies, it was charting new ground, and that was what made it unique. And now it just feels like they've run out of ideas, so they're sort of redoing things, or they're going back and filling gaps, and
yeah.
that's just not as entertaining to watch. So I
No,
sincerely hope that Star Wars can like maybe get back to being the pioneer of the industry, that it spiritually, the franchise represented the cutting edge of what Hollywood it was all about, and
yeah.
up until the day George Lucas sold it, and since then it just feels like it's gone off course. I sincerely hope that it can get back on track.
Well, so one of the things that you mentioned earlier was James Earl Jones licensing his voice to be replicated for Darth Vader as AI for the rest of Star Wars existence. And I'm so angered by this for a number of reasons. Number one, it means Darth Vader is going to be around forever. They're going to just keep pushing more and more Darth Vader. That's not terribly inspiring in terms of the franchise. As a voice actor, I also have to say, what a mistake. And there's there's no reason you couldn't hire somebody else to do a performance and create something that exists in the moment. I think you can get away with Darth Vader for a little while because it's filtered and it's deliberately made to sound a little robotic. But man, I mean, you are how far down into the rabbit hole of technology replacing human work do we really want to go? I mean, at
Yeah,
the end of the if this is really the cutting edge of digital, you know, digital art, we could have AI paint the sets and render all of like that. Dolly is getting really, really good, and these AI programs, like you could.
yes.
Why go through the trouble of hiring an artist or an actor? We're deep faking Luke Skywalker. We're gonna be, you know, doing a AI fill in for Darth Vader. I mean, and the writing. Let's let the AI do the writing too. It can't be as bad as it's been, you
A
know.
lot of that
So
stuff is already happening, by the way. Like
it's
that's
I don't
already
doubt it.
people
I
have
don't
like
doubt it.
tried it and stuff.
It's this is it's not a terribly inspiring move in terms of creativity. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I agree with you that I think the right move would have been to cast somebody new and give them an opportunity and pass the baton. That's, I think, the same reason why when they had the young actress play Princess Leia in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, if you put aside the idea of, oh, we're going back to the same characters over and over again, I was at the very least happy to see that they didn't just decide to deep fake something or use some
Yeah.
other VFX technology to kind of put the Carrie Fisher's face back on somebody, some other actor who did the work. Like for example, Darth Vader has always been like, and it's an amalgamation of performances. You had, I'm
Hmm.
forgetting the name of the actor who was in the suit itself on set, and then James Earl Jones voiced him. So it was never like one person that made the character. But today, now, if you watch a future project where some kind of a shot like what we have on screen now comes up, and you have Luke Skywalker on the left, they have some actor standing in, and then in post production they use AI based, VFX tech to put like Mark Hamill's face on top,
By the
and then on the
way,
right the character's voice is AI based, and some other actor who's probably not the same actor that originally, was in the costume back in the original trilogy. The whole
yeah,
shot, and like you said, the background could be like the volume, so it's all generated in like Unreal
absolutely.
Engine. The whole shot is basically like a video game at that point. Is it really a
Yeah.
movie?
And by the way, the like I think even Mark Hamill has said he didn't do a very good job acting as Luke Skywalker. And I happen to agree with him. It's like
Yeah.
why are we trying to preserve that? You know?
Right. That's the thing. It's almost like there's like this religious um
Reverence.
reverence for exactly because I'm like you watch if you take it the original trilogy and you look back at it and judge it simply on the merits of like say the acting or like I mean the cinematography was groundbreaking for the time in terms of the visual effects and how they executed all that was groundbreaking, but as far as the acting is concerned, there's a reason why so many of the best actors of their time passed on the Han Solo role, and
Hmm.
Harrison Ford, who at the time had really no reputation, beyond having done maybe a couple of small things. He took that role on and then made it his own and iconic, and then he went on to do Indiana Jones, which even that role wasn't meant to go to Harrison Ford in the first place. Um, but there's a reason why those movies like did not have like A-list actors coming in and taking on these roles. The biggest actor being who played the original. Why am I forgetting his name? The original Obi-Wan Kenobi. Um,
Allen
those
Guinness.
they're not very well acted. So I think when you move forward with it, why not just evolve and improve upon it? Like people have said that the actor who plays the Winter Soldier in the MCU, who I'm really bad with names today for some reason, Sebastian Stan,
Hmm.
he can really stand in
Got it.
for a Luke Skywalker, and he looks like Mark Hamill, the young Mark Hamill. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I would totally not mind seeing that. I mean, Ehrenreich like did a fantastic job playing Han Solo in the Solo movie, but I think Disney just looked at it like it's a flop. We're not gonna like have new actors play these old characters, or if we're gonna recast them, we're gonna do what we did with Princess Leia, a young character that kind of maybe grows with the role, and then the majority of people watching a Princess Leia um, 10 years from now will see her the face of that new character playing it, and then they'll go back in retrospect and see, oh, Carrie Fisher was Princess Leia like originally. Oh, that's cool, but like the perspective will be different. So it is
Yeah.
tricky,
You
but
know you know what else I
ultimately,
just yeah.
yeah, ultimately I just think the idea of having AI take over something, I don't want to sound like, oh, AI, the robots are taking over our jobs. That's not the argument I'm trying to make. But when you're making art, and movie making is an art form, I think it's always a better idea when you can like hand off something like that, like a role in a movie, like an iconic
Yeah.
role from one actor to a new generation, and pass the baton, and then let them do something new and different with it and make it their own for their time.
Well, and to piggyback off of that, it's like this is something that's infecting not just movies and television, but music. And anytime you can automate something, what you're doing is you're cutting other people out of the process. And I think that's part of what's so alienating about our culture right now is that everybody's sort of in it for themselves, trying to prove how much they can do alone. And we've lost the art of collaboration and interpersonal connection and even performance. Like, it's so refreshing when you can see something where you can feel the humanity of it and you can feel people working together trying their best. We don't really feel that so much because you can have one person do all of the production and all of the instrumentation and backing vocals for a song, or there used to be bands and now we just have DJs, and we don't the opportunities to see humans interacting and doing something with humanity are few and far between these days. And I think we may see a renaissance of live theater, of sort of a reaction to this, where we want to see real things happening in real time with real people. And it won't matter how good it looks. It'll just be the moment shared by people. That's what I'd like anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, again, backing up what your point was, I do think filmmaking is the ultimate form of collaborative art, and that should never go away, and that should always be at the core of like the spirit of movie making. So yes, while it's great, and sometimes budgets deem it so that you want to have one person do multiple jobs, like when you in indie filmmaking, you see it all the time.
Yeah.
The one, like, many people are wearing many like hats, so you have one person, maybe the producer, but they're also like the one like bringing coffee to everybody on set, because they can't afford to like hire 5 PAs or something,
Well,
right? Like, you
sure,
see that,
but this is where we end up with, director, actor, writer Olivia Wilde and a movie that's not very good because
yeah.
it's just
And
all
look,
about her.
sometimes a singular vision across like all aspects of a movie is a good thing. I think by and large, that's the right way, in my opinion, to do it, like an altruistic vision. But the
If you
best
have
kind
the
of
altruistic
collaboration
vision.
is the best kind of collaboration is when you have a director who is involved in every aspect, but not necessarily doing everything. Because if you try to direct a movie and then also star in the movie,
Yeah.
that is like twice or 5 times harder than if you're just directing alone. Because as a director, you're already interacting with the actors and every other department in the movie, and to then, because then what you start happening is you're gonna do a lesser job at everything because you're trying to do too much, and then the whole movie will suffer for it. So
Yeah.
yeah. Anyway,
Well, I think we've indicted the culture to a
the
far
state of
enough
Star
degree.
Wars.
The
As we were
state of
talking
Star
about.
Wars. Well, you know what? The state of Star Wars, if that's the state of the art of, visual effects and production, and production really is the culture that exists today, it it's not exactly off topic. Like, that's the pinnacle of it, and these are the repercussions of it. So if it's a trendsetter, if it's at the head of the herd there, trying to show us how it's done, I don't know how long I really want to follow that leader.
Yeah.
Tell us what you think. Tell us if you agree, what you think the state of Star Wars is, or if it even really gives us an indication of what the state of culture is. Maybe we're just reading a little too much into it. Maybe not. Maybe you agree. But in any case, like, subscribe, share, comment, do all the things. We appreciate it. And let us know what you think, because you could be part of this conversation too if you wanted. We're just people talking about stuff we see.